Shalom, Israel. This is not a Bible lesson. This is a history lesson. We will not be dealing with any scriptures, but update on starting the church. We have some people on the list. Yay! So, anyways, hopefully contact me if you want to be involved. We're starting a church. It's going to be more of a fellowship, but as far as that goes, it's going to be probably about 2 months before we start. And the first couple Sabbaths, we're going to live stream on YouTube from home. And then with the people, as the list continues to grow, um, once we have 5 dedicated people, we'll try to rent a room or like at a library or reserve a meeting space, excuse me, and do it there. So that's that. As you saw from the title, this lesson is going to be uh, Israelite slaves in the American South. And that picture, that's actually not from the American South. I just put that picture to make it a talking point. That's actually a picture of slaves in Puerto Rico, because people, especially, I know in New York they get this more because they have a lot of Afro Latinos there. But in other parts of the country, like in the Midwest, where the Puerto Ricans are not black, most of them are like where you don't have a lot of Dominicans and stuff like that. You're not so Some people don't realize like that Puerto Ricans are Israelite, like that some Puerto Ricans are Israelites, and a lot of slaves were brought to Puerto Rico. So that picture is actually from Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's Israelite population or black population is growing because the economy, it has deteriorated to such a point in Puerto Rico that where Puerto Rico is experiencing massive, I don't want to call it immigration because Puerto Rico is a part of the United States. So they're not immigrating to another country, but migrating or moving. And most of those migrants are white Puerto Ricans. So the black population in Puerto Rico has actually been going up, and like 30% of the population right now of Puerto Rico is black or mulatto. So, anyways, I just put that up there as a talking point. Also, before we move forward, another point I wanted to bring out for the people who look for high value sources. Let me see if I pull this up. You're gonna have to hear it from my voice. I'm not gonna put this up, but if you can get your hands on it's called a Dictionary of World History, a Dictionary of World History, the third edition, publisher Oxford University Press. Um, let's see, publication date 2015. Just Google it. A Dictionary of World History, third edition, Oxford University Press, is the publisher, and it was published in 2015. But in it, when you look up under Punic Wars, and remember the Punic people, all the Punic people were Canaanites and Israelites that are Canaanites and Hebrews that were living in North Africa and Northwest Africa in BC times. So like in Bible times, like Old Testament times, and the apocryphal period times. That's what Punic essentially is, and their language, the Punic language, was very similar to Hebrew. Um, anyways, so if you look under the Punic Wars entry in that book, it will say, I'm just going to read the first sentence for Punic Wars. The three wars fought in the 3rd and 2nd century BC between Rome and Carthage, so named from Ponicius, dark skin, or Phoenician. So the point is it's telling you right there that it was named after the Punic people or the Phoenicians, which were the people who settled, were the primary people who founded, and then which were Canaanites who founded Carthage, that they were a dark skinned people. And so, the Israelites lived amongst the Canaanites and married the Canaanites. Even the tribe of Judah comes from a Canaanite matrilineal line. they they're just letting you know that these were dark skinned people. So I know there's like Kemetologists, or I don't know, no, Egyptologists and people who are into the Kemet stuff and coming from what I call the Hamitic perspective, for our people. But you get in these debates and they try to say like, oh, the Phoenicians weren't black. Like, this is one of their own sources that I'm giving you that you can use against them. So, anyways, let's as I like to say, dive on in. Um, so the objective of this lesson, this is a short lesson. This short lesson will demonstrate that Israelites in America are the so-called African American, Afro American, Black American, colored, and Negro. And I put all the titles in there because those are all the different things that we have gone by in the United States throughout our history here right now. And there's still people, even in 2018, that still use these terms. So, but in reality, we are the Israelites, descend from 6 principal groups. Okay, and so we're going to look at these 6 principal groups. The 6 principal groups that they descend from are the Akan, the Igbo, the Yoruba, the Fang, the Malinke. And the Malinke that's just the same thing as the Mandinka, Mandingo. It's the same thing. And the Bakongo. 2, it will also prove that Israelite slaves in the South knew they were Hebrews. So that's the other main thing. I'm going to bring out a source, as they like to say, bring it out. I'm going to bring out a source that's going to show from the South, from the deep South, that the slaves knew they were Hebrews. And it's an academic source. Okay. Almost 100 years old. And where its information was taken from is over 100 years old. It's about 130 years old. So, like I said, as I like to say, let's dive on in. Okay, we have a academic secondary source, and the title of it is Negro Folk Music in Eastern South Carolina, a thesis presented to the faculty of the School of Music, University of Southern California, in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Master of Music, by Jack Watton, February 1940. Okay, this is from Chapter 1, African Influences. In the year 1671, Sir John Yeamans, who became the first governor of Carolina. Now, this is the colony of Carolina. So at the time, it included North Carolina and South Carolina. This is before the Revolutionary War. Brought to the state its first Negro slaves. From this time on, the importation of slaves increased very rapidly until in 1715, the census revealed 10,500 Negro slaves and 6,200 white settlers. So by 1715, the Carolina colony had a black majority, or an Israelite majority. Excuse me. Though, and like I said, we're about to get into some real stuff with the history. Though spoken of as Negroes, there were many among these slaves who were not racially Negroid. The slave coast from which most of them were brought to this country was the home of only a portion of them. Many came from the interior of the continent. This is all things we've covered before on here. There were some Malays from Madagascar, and I have to add a clarification there. With the ones that came from Madagascar, some definitely were Malays. A lot of them were Bantu, and a lot of them were a mixture of Bantu and Malay. and on Madagascar, you find Bantus and you find Malays and you find a mixture. Um, and that's a lesson for another day. But there were Israelites in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia in the Malay countries, just like there in Melanesia. You have Negritos in the Philippines, even. So these are things that should be common knowledge, but you have to look into those things on your own time. Uh, some Moors from the northern portion of the continent, and this is true. There were some Moors because you even had some people from Morocco and the Carolinas who had to sue not to be classified as Negro or black. They wanted to be classified as Moors, and they were Moorish citizens, like Moroccan citizens. Um, and I think it was like the Ben Ali family. But anyways, so you did have that, and you also had there were Israelites amongst the Moors, and that's also a lesson for another day because the term Moor goes way back. It also goes back to the Punic times, and you can relate. A lot of the Moors were of Punic origins, and over time, other groups got added on. Like at the time when they were ruling Europe, you had a lot of Arab influence and other Berber influences going on as well. Okay, but it's letting you know here that there were slaves taken from the Moors early on, Israelites taken from amongst the Moors and brought here. All right, let's keep going. Among the Negroes themselves, the diversity of tribes was so great that more than 20 different languages were spoken, to say nothing of dialects. And mind you, like most of these, especially you have the Niger Congo group, right? And the Bantu component of the Niger Congo group, it's a lot of languages, like maybe 400, but in reality, like it's almost mutually interchangeable. They can all kind of mutually understand each other, kind of similar to like Portuguese and Spanish. Um, the West African branch, like the Atlantic languages, and that grouping of the Niger Congo, like theirs is a little bit more diverse and it's not as easily translatable. But the point is it's not really a whole lot of languages like that where it's like not everybody can understand each other. Um, that's not the case. Okay. Um, but this is the main point we want to get right here. Advertisements for the sale in Charleston of Gold Coast Negroes, which appeared in 1785, suggests the probability that the Cormantes, who came from that section of Africa, may have contributed largely to the Negro race during its development under slavery. So it's letting you know here that based off of uh, sales in 1785 in the Carolina colony or South Carolina, that the bulk of the slaves that came in that year were Cormanti, and Cormanti, it's an Akan slave. It's a term for the fort that they came out of on the Gold Coast, called Cormanti. And they were mostly the result of wars between Akan clans fighting for supremacy and selling their war captives. They were also known to be warlike, but also highly civilized. That's why they were utilized in high numbers in South Carolina. Um, I have Akan ancestry. That's my paternal line ancestry. I will link the lesson. I'm going to link the lesson for the Akan, the Yoruba, and the Igbo to the end of this. I'm also going to link the lesson, the lesson on the Akan, Yoruba, and Igbo, showing you that they're Israelites and showing their biblical migration. I'll link that at the end of this. I'm also going to link at the end of this um, the one I did on Kitos war refugees circa 118 AD to West Africa, also documenting how Israelites migrated into West Africa. I'm trying to think. There's another lesson I'm gonna link on here. I'm gonna link the complete history of the Israelites, which goes through their whole history. Um, but there's another lesson I'm probably gonna link, but we'll see. Well, let's go forward. We're about to get the main dagger. The next thing we're going to read shows you that it's going to show you who are the principal groups of Africans who settled the United States, and specifically the southern United States, because that's where the slaves came from. And we're going to show you that they knew they were Hebrews. Okay, second page. Gambia Negroes were not an uncommon importation and are said to have found a ready market. Senegalese, with their decided Arabic strain, and we're going to get into that. That's basically what you see the next one, Mandangos. That is, and we're giving you the 6 principal groups that were the Israelites in the United States came from, and principally where they were imported to the American South to be slaves. So you have the Mandangos, which are the Malinka people that you find in West Africa, especially in Senegambia. They are there's a lot of them. Also, but also you had some slaves that were sold from the Wolof, and they weren't Wolof; they're what they call Jam. But the Wolof had slaves that they owned, and that formed a caste amongst them, and that caste married only amongst their own caste, and they were usually captives taken from other groups in Senegambia, and they're called Jam. And you have the same thing with the Fulani, but primarily from Senegambia, it was Malinka slaves being taken or being sold uh, to the American South. Next, you have Wahidas, and that's Judah. That's the kingdom. I've covered this on here before, but it's also known as Judah. You will see it spelled that way on some maps. It's a Yoruba word talking about a bird, but it's also transliterated as Judah. Um, because most of the slaves being taken from there were Israelites, and the kingdom was originally founded by Israelites because the Akan founded it, and it was founded by the Akwamu clan of the Akan, which are Israelites. These are the Cormantes, and afterwards there were Yoruba who lived in the area, and afterwards the Fan people took over the area and established the empire of Dahomey, and started wide scale slave selling to the Europeans, and also other atrocities on a wide scale in the region. All right. Next, and like I said, check the lessons I've done on the Akan and the Yoruba, the one that I'm linking at the end, and the Igbo. It deals with this, and I deal with Judah and Waheda and its background, and how the Akan people descend from the Israelites. And I give you primary sources. I give you biblical sources. Um, it's There's no debating. I give you sources from the elders of the Akan, and I get in the same thing with the Yoruba and different things. Just check that video out. Anyways, next group. But coming out of there, you had out of Wahida or Judah, you had primarily Akan and Yoruba slaves. And then next you have Nagos, which is a clan of the Yoruba. Um, if anybody knows who Pow Pows is, I don't know what that one is. All industrious and strong. Congos, and that's the Bakongo people. As on our first slide, they were one of the groups listed. And then Gabon, that's modern day Gabon, and that's primarily the Fang people, the Fang people. Um, let's see. And the yellow skinned Igbos were offered in the slave markets. And that's your Igbos that you find in Nigeria now, south in Biafra. Um, I noticed there that it said yellow skinned Igbos. Because that's another thing. The Hebrews and the Israelites, like our people, when we came over here, we weren't all dark. Some of us were super dark, some of us were brown, some of us were yellow. Not the fact that you're light skinned may, unless you know you have a direct, white ancestor within the last couple hundred years, it's not a guarantee that that's because of relations with the slave master. You could have already just been, light skin or brown. Anyways, by the middle of the 18th century, the South was seething with thousands upon thousands of these captives from the four corners of Africa, all thrown together upon the resources of a new language, a new religion, and a new moral code. A consideration of certain distinctive features of their African religion cannot fail to deepen our understanding of the life of the Negro in America, and particularly that life which influenced his music. Now notice the part where I have circled with the pen. Primitive Negro music may be traced to sources which can be found points of contact with Judaism and a Jewish type of Christianity. So notice what they said here. That primitive Negro music may be traced to sources in which can be found points of contact with Judaism and a Jewish type of Christianity. So you see here that she's letting you know that the slave, we've seen where the slaves came from. The six main groups that I outlined in the beginning. And then it's letting you know that there are points of contact for where, and it's talking about their music because she's dealing with folk music. But folk music, just all folk music means is traditional music. So that means the traditional music of the people. So she's saying here that the traditional music, or he's saying here, my bad, that the traditional music of the black slaves in America are the African slaves in America, which principally came from six groups, was Judaic in nature. Like that it was a Judaic, and notice that it doesn't even just say, it says a Jewish type of Christianity, which is basically what we're doing, what we're about right now, which is keep the commandments, like believe in Christ, but you have to keep the commandments. The only laws that Christ did away with when he died on the cross was animal sacrifice and the Levitical priesthood. The Bible is clear on that. Everything else in the Bible you have to do, or you don't, if you don't want to, and you have to just believe it and understand it. But the point is that's the type of religion that they're saying that they had. And I just wanted to bring that out. Like, oh, there's a source, a good source. And we're going to see where she got her information from, came from like 1890, or he. I don't know why I keep wanting to say she. I think I'm trying to give credit to the woman, which is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with giving credit to women. But I think I have another source that must be a woman or something. Okay. Next, quickly, so we've established the six groups that Israelites in America came from and were brought to the American South as slaves. Those groups were the Bakongo, and that's when in that source we were just using, when they spoke of the Congo, that's what they were speaking of, and they were brought primarily to the Gulf Coast. The Fang, which also corresponds with the modern day country of Gabon in Africa, they came and they were brought to the Gulf Coast. Both of these groups were brought directly by the Spanish and the French, but they were also brought in after the Haitian Revolution. And when the slave masters left Haiti, and a lot of them went to Louisiana, they brought their slaves. Same thing with the Yoruba. With the Yoruba, that's where you get the Nago people in the source we just got. They were a clan of Yoruba people who lived in Togo, and I'm not going to name the name of the other country, because it's a name that they borrowed from another completely different group in Nigeria who had a kingdom, who were also brutal towards Israelites. But this group, Dahomey, you were so brutal, like even more brutal, that the country couldn't even be named after you. So you took another kingdom's name that's not even related to you and named it your country. I'm not going to name that country, but that's where they were. And a lot of them were brought to the Gulf Coast. The Malinke people, which corresponded to Senegambia and what we covered, a lot of them were brought to Virginia, Carolina, Georgia, and the Mississippi Delta. And specifically with the Mississippi Delta, it was because a lot of them were tall and strong, so they could clear out the dense forest in the Delta to make the fertile farmland. So they just used them as brutes to clear out dense forests. And where else? Oh, in the Carolinas, they were good rice growers, and Carolina was a rice colony. The Akan were brought to Carolina as well. Same thing, good at growing rice, but also as a result of the wars that were going on amongst the Akan during the time, and the British being there and their involvement, and the Dutch. And so, yeah. And then you have the Igbo, which were primarily brought to Virginia, Maryland, and Georgia. Okay. And yeah. Let us move on. Okay, now for some more sources. This is from Nat Turner, The Complexity and Dynamic of His Religious Background, Jacoby Williams, Journal of Pan African Studies, 4.9, January 2012. Says pages 113 plus, from Literature Resource Center, copyright 2012. Uh, he says, historian Douglas Chambers has established that the concentration of Igbo, and to a lesser extent of Western Bantu, slaves in the central Piedmont, of Mande/Malinke slaves in the northern neck, and of Akan influenced slaves in the lower peninsula, laid the foundation for the development of distinct African subcultures in Virginia. And that source where he got his information from is from Douglas Chambers. He going to sing he country, Africans, Afro-Virginians, and the development of slave culture in Virginia, 1619 to 1810. PhD dissertation, the University of Virginia in 1996, pages 285 through 287. Lastly, this last source is the source where my first source got his information from, which is Edward McGrady, History of South Carolina under the Proprietary Government, 1670 to 1719, New York, published the Macmillan Company, 1897. Appendix Table 9. All right, just bringing out information. Hope you enjoyed this history lesson. More to come soon. I know I said I wasn't going to be doing any more lessons because of starting a church, but this was just the history lesson. This wasn't a Bible lesson. So, hope you were blessed. Shalom.